The global insurance industry is more than a market.
It's a movement powered by 3 million professionals around the world.
Together, we support communities as they rebuild after disaster.
Help businesses through risk and uncertainty.
Protect individuals as they plan for brighter futures.
This impact isn't possible without people.
That's why we attract, grow, and retain the very best talent.
Because when every voice is heard,
When every person feels they belong.
We don't just build careers.
We build a better tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Welcome to the Inclusive Leader Building a Culture of Belonging, an event we've been very much looking forward to and tremendously excited about the fact that we had over 500 people sign up for this when they've got such busy lives and we've got such a senior audience. So no pressure panel and audience, but this is a real opportunity to show how leadership can make an impact and can create that culture of belonging. Without further ado, just remind ourselves of those learning objectives and what we're here to do. I'm not going to read them out, but for the panel, there's key words in each of these objectives that we've set ourselves today. One is we're going to explore those key qualities that we look for from leaders that we feel does create that sense of belonging and that leadership that we can trust and relate to. And we've done some surveys and research that a lot of you have participated in across the market, and we'll be sharing the results of those to inform that discussion. But because we set this up very much as a what makes that effective leader to create that culture of belonging, we're going to be looking for what makes people effective. Our panel are going to share what's gone well, where they've had learning points. They're going to be open and candid in their discussion points with you so that you can learn what effectiveness can look like. And then, of course, what can you take away from today's session? How can you leave today? And any of you have been to any panels I've chaired before, this is one of my stock items is, go away and do something differently tomorrow. So throughout the whole of the session, when you're thinking about questions, when you're listening to the panel, what can you go away from today and do differently tomorrow? And if you haven't got that by the end of the panel discussion, that's fine, because when you get to the questions, that's your opportunity to probe that in a little bit more detail. So that's just the opening. So that you know who's speaking, I'm Kate Headley, for those that haven't met me before. I've met quite a few people in the room, and I've met a lot of you virtually. I've had the pleasure of spending my time across the Lloyd's market for the past decade as the account director for the Clear Company, and I've worked with a lot of you in the boardroom. So I know the things that cause excitement, and I know the things that cause fear. So I'm very excited about what you're going to be discussing and probing today. I'm also, for those of you in the UK, I'm a UK government advisor on disability and access. So if there's anything around that, you know, do stop me. And just to remind ourselves, I'm sure you're old hands at this now, we're on day 3. So we have a Slido QR code. If you can put your cameras up and register that. If you can ask questions all the way through. Again, for those of you who haven't read my bio, I'm quite severely partially sighted, so waving your hand at me won't get you very far at all. But luckily, I've got fantastic panel members, particularly Katie, who's going to keep her eye on the room and let me know if you want to ask a question. We're going to make time for Q&A at the end, very definitely. But again, if there is a burning question at any point during the panel discussion that you want to pose, then again, Katie's going to note that for me, and we can just pause and have that question with the panel at that particular time. So hopefully that makes all sense. And what's important now is to introduce the panel. I also need to introduce the fact that this is for the first time we've got local partners at Lloyd's for the Dive-In Festival, and this is the local partners event. So it's supported by ourselves at the Clear Company, by KPMG, by Inigo and the Hartford. So between the teams at those companies, we've put together what we hope is going to be a very powerful, insightful event for you all. And I thank you all for the contributions, and to have CEOs on a panel when the world is so busy is just fabulous. So I'm really excited. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves as they contribute through the day, but just so that you know who we are, we've got Carl from the Hartford, we've got Katie from KPMG, we've got Lorraine from Asta, and then we've got Nathan, obviously, from Lloyd's, who are hosting for us today. So we should be able to get quite a lot of information about that level of leadership on a panel in a room. So, to start us off, we did a poll across the market, and again, thanks very much for those of you who contributed, because it gave us a lot of insight. And again, as I mentioned, sort of just touched on at the beginning, one of the things that we find when you work with leaders, and I'm sure Katie in your role as well, you come across this regularly too, is that fear of getting it wrong. That fear of not saying the right thing, that fear of feeling a little bit clumsy when you're representing your organisation. But look what our people across this market, your colleagues, your fellow leaders, the people you lead say. That's right down at the bottom in terms of where they feel you need to be in order to be an authentic leader. What's right up at the top is absolutely within your gift as leaders. It's authenticity and empathy. They're the two hottest topics that people look for, or the biggest behaviours that people look for and attributes in their leaders. So my big ask to you, and the leaders are going to share with us their insights and experience on this, is that it's about what you can do and how you make people feel, not the books that you've read or the learning that you've done necessarily. It's about that authentic leadership right from the top. And we're going to talk about that in some detail now with Carl. Because I know, Carl, that one of the reasons that your team selected you to come on the panel today was because they see you as an authentic leader, and they wanted you to share with us what does that mean to you in terms of exploring as a leader how to be authentic in everything that you do.
All right. Well, first off, thank you for having me on the panel and for the warm welcome. It really is an honor to be part of this conversation, and it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the Hartford as an organization. Secondly, I'd be remiss not to say we're really, really proud sponsors of the Dive-In Festival. It really is a true reflection of who we are as a company and the values that stand behind us. So more than happy to be part of it. When I first got asked, I didn't realize I was put forward, so good to clarify. But when I was asked to sit on this panel, I immediately thought I'm going to lead with a personal story, because for me, what I learned and how I've learned about the importance of authentic leadership is not through reading textbooks, it's not through attending seminars and management courses, but it was experiencing an absence of authentic leadership when I first started out in my career. And without going into the details of individuals and companies and whatnot, I first started out and was in an environment that really made me question my sense of belonging, my sense of abilities as a new employee to the workforce. I thought it was normal that I was learning. I was not supported. I was made to feel really a lack of self-worth, to the point where I suffered from some physical manifestations of that as well, and ended up resigning and decided to go back to university because I thought genuinely I didn't have enough skills. I wasn't ready to enter the workforce. And now subsequently, when I found a new home post getting my MBA, I realized it wasn't necessarily me. It was an environment, it was leadership, and a lack of that authenticity that I was feeling. But it really left a lasting impact on me, and I made a commitment to myself at the time that if I was ever fortunate enough to be in a position to lead people, that feeling and how I was and where I was at that time would never leave me, and I'd make sure that I did bring my true self to work, and I was creating an environment of trust and safety, and one where people felt that they could be supported. So it means a lot to me. And I think that maybe the first point of practical advice that I would give is kind of related to that, is define what your values are. Seek out an organization that represents those values. I was in that organization that did not have those values. It was culturally never going to be hiring leaders that were going to support that. And so find that organization that has values that are aligned to you. And then once you get in those organizations and you have the ability to lead, I would say role model those values, lean into that, and make sure you're creating those spaces for people. And I think that's what we've done. And the Hartford is very much an organization I'm fortunate enough to have found that has values that align to mine. We've recently refreshed our values, and they're really centered around trust and excellence and equity and community and resilience, and all things that the Dive-In Festival, the sessions, which I've been fortunate enough to attend a few over the past few days, I think represent. And so I think that's a key part of, I think, enabling successful leaders. And then I think once you found those organizations, I think it's really, as leaders, it's beholden on us to find out what matters to our employees, and then creating those spaces, whether it be through community events. And some of the things that we've done practically is ensure that we're creating space for people to engage with the community and giving them time, 3 paid days to engage. And then also as a leader, I think it's important that I attend and also participate. You know, when we have leadership offsites or team offsites now, I think instead of just going to the bar and having some networking drinks and things after those things, what we generally tend to do now is require or highly encourage a community event, something where we're giving back as opposed to just the norm. So I think that would be some practical advice. And then I think, in terms of how we engage and make sure that leaders across the Hartford are doing that, we very much have embedded authenticity and authentic leadership into our behaviors. So we have a prescribed set of behaviors that we expect all of our employees and leaders to exhibit. And then most recently, we have released a leader profile, which again sets the expectations of what we define as successful leaders. And leading with authenticity is one of them. Leading with aspiration and inspiration and integrity is another one. But then we then ultimately link compensation to that. We do things like 360 feedback. So we're creating that space for leaders to listen and get feedback, hopefully more than they're talking. And I think those behaviors tend to be embedded, and they're more than just words on a slide.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many points there for us to untangle and unravel. I'll come back to you with a couple of questions if I may. But it's interesting because as it's somebody that sort of works in leadership, you're often asked as a speaker, what's the most important thing? What's the most important thing I need to do? And actually, we would always say, or I certainly would almost say, the most important thing is to be authentic, because it drives everything you do. So what you've been talking about there, Carl, is not only what you do, how you do it, how you support other people to do it by setting those behavioural expectations, and you're measuring the impact of it because you genuinely, authentically want it to be working well.
Absolutely.
And that's what's coming through. I'd be really interested, I'm sure that the delegates in the audience would be interested as well. And you mentioned a leadership profile and leadership behaviours. Yeah. That's something I personally feel really passionate about. So I'd be very keen to hear how that went. How did you implement that? How was it received by the leaders who, this is a market where we didn't have role profiles 10 years ago, so we're now giving, distinct behaviours with positive and negative indicators. Takes a bit of a sell. So how have you managed that at the Hartford?
So with support from my team, many of them are here, as well as the enterprise. But I think the foundations at which we were starting from were strong, as is what I would lead with. So I think our behaviors have evolved over time. They've recently been refreshed, but they've always been centered on, on things like, owning it at pace and innovation and respect for your colleagues, right? Creating safe environments for our people. We've most recently introduced a little bit more focus on customer and then working across the group, so things like collaboration to leverage the power of the enterprise. So they've evolved, and one of the key things, apart from, I think, culturally people really buy into them, is we do link the behaviors to compensation. So 50% of our long-term incentives and bonuses are based on behaviors. And there's an element of judgment, obviously, that comes with that, but it's real. And I think that that does influence behaviors in a positive way. The other 50% obviously is results, but I think it drives a culture where the focus is not just on what the result is, but it's how you get that result.
Yeah, it's how the behaviours lead to the results. Yes. And that's a really interesting conversation and a really good takeaway of, creating that culture of belonging is part of creating a successful performing culture, isn't it? Because everybody does their absolute best and they're enabled to do so.
Absolutely.
Any questions at all from Carl on any of that? Have we got anything that's come through, Katie, on our...
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions.
Any themes?
We've got a number of them on the point you've just raised around how do you link authentic leadership to the way people are recognising individuals. But then we've got one here about how do you create authenticity in a more digital world with more remote workforce?
It's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think we encourage a combination of both virtual and in-person attendance in the office, right? We don't have any mandates in terms of 3 days, 5 days, etc. But generally speaking, we want to see people throughout the course of a year more days in the office than we don't, and it's important for exactly that reason, for culture and for inclusivity. But in the digital space, I think we want to be mindful. We're always mindful of, certainly as a leader, myself and my leadership team is mindful to make sure that we are including those that are in meetings remotely, making sure that they have a space for questions, and I think engaging them through other channels, right? We just had an all-employee strategy session last week. We had 50 people virtually. We had 200 people in person, but that option is always there, and I think we want to be mindful of engaging both in the room and outside of the room.
Great. Thank you so much. Anything else burning before we move on, Katie?
No, I think that we've covered.
We've got somebody in the room. Thank you so much.
My question is around how do you draw the line between wanting to make a change when you've recognized you're in a toxic workplace, say the leadership is toxic, for example, and protecting yourself and leaving, like you said, you left because my personality is wanting to solve problems, and I found myself in toxic work environments where in hindsight I felt like I stayed longer than I should have because I was trying to make a change. So where do you draw that line without feeling like you gave up or you left too soon?
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely think I stayed way too long. I stayed 3 years, and I probably knew in the first couple of months that it was a bad situation, hence maybe the physical manifestation. And I was pushed in the sense that the company I was working for went bankrupt. So it was kind of, and so I would say, if you're having that conversation, if anyone's having that conversation with themselves, it's probably time to go. And if they're still uncertain, I would say find an ally. Find someone that you trust in the organization that you can speak to. It might be someone within the HR team. It might be a colleague. It might be someone from a different department. But I remember specifically being in a situation where someone pulled me into a room and said, "Hey, are you okay?" I witnessed that. That's not okay. And I was very young, so I was like, well, probably, I don't know, is it? Is it not? And still doubting myself. And from that minute on, I had that person as an ally. And they were looking out for me, and I knew that I could go to them. So I think find an ally would be my advice, someone you can trust. Or if you are actually asking yourself that question, I think you probably know the answer already.
Yeah. I think that's a great advice, is sort of allyship, but also building on that, just what you were talking about before in terms of, and I know Nathan's going to share Lloyd's perspective on this as well, so I won't steal your thunder, Nathan, about having a voice. So if you have a voice and you raise it and it's not listened to, and then you have a voice and you raise it and it's not listened to, and as long as you're doing that in a professional way, then there comes a point when you think, actually, do you know, I've asked enough, I've raised it enough, they're not listening to me, we're not got the same values. And I have a relatable story, so I hate to say it because it's 40 years ago, so it doesn't matter, the organisation's changed, but I trained with M&S, my management training was M&S, and it was square peg, round hole, and I stayed 5 years, and it took me about another 10 to rebuild my confidence. So if you think it's ready to go, then it's ready to go. And that's nothing to do with M&S, by the way, it was just the wrong fit at the time. Just want to make that perfectly clear to everybody in the room, because they're a fabulous company and it was great training. Okay. So we'll come back. We will come back to some more questions, I'm sure, at the end of the panel. Has anybody? I know that we didn't rehearse this, but if anybody from the panel has got something burning they would like to add to the topic, then please do let me know. Anything at all, or we're happy to move on? So, and it's come up already in terms of those discussions. I think it's a word that actually, Carl, you used around empathy. And Katie, I know you're going to share with us why you think empathy is so important. It's what obviously the poll showed us was it's empathy. So I'd really like to hear your views on that, and also what you do to create empathy.
Yeah, thank you very much. As Carl said, as I'm from KPMG, I'm delighted that we're here as a sponsor of Dive In. It's a fantastic event for us to be involved with, and again, I was also very excited to be asked to join this panel, and I'm very excited to see some of my colleagues in the audience as well. So in terms of empathy, I think empathy is probably the most important thing for me personally. I have been in a similar situation in a team where I didn't feel valued and I didn't feel able to express myself, and I didn't feel that there was an empathetic response. And I know how lonely that can be. And so for me, it's a really important part of who we are as leaders and how we create a workforce and an environment that supports everyone to be their best. I was thinking about this before the event, and I looked at some old clips. Meryl Streep back in the 70s described empathy as a superpower, and I totally agree with that. I think it is an absolute superpower that we should all harness more of, and we should make it more of our everyday life if we can. I think in today's world it's even more important. If I look back over my sadly nearly 30-year career, the types of people and the experiences that those people have had is so vastly different from the very narrow group of people that I was exposed to when I joined professional services all that time ago. And that is a brilliant thing. That is absolutely fantastic. It is great for organizations. It's great for people. It's great for talent. But it does mean that that is harder for us as leaders to really understand what that means for people. And when you think about empathy, people quite often use the quote from To Kill a Mockingbird around, you never understand a person until you get inside his skin and walk around. Now, we can't do that. You know, there are just so many different perspectives and experiences that people have had. There is no way that even secondhand we can experience all of that. But actually, when you think about I slightly truncated the quote. The fuller quote is actually, you can't understand a person until you understand his point of view and then get inside his skin and walk around. And I think that's the bit that's important, is how do we get to a point where we understand somebody else's point of view. We don't have to experience it ourselves, we just need to understand it. Now, that's not to say that that's not difficult, because it certainly is. I think it's also important from a perspective of the world, particularly in the last few years, has become increasingly polarized. And in a polarized world, we are going to come across people who we work with, who are very valuable, who will have diametrically opposite opinions to us. And how we manage that and how we deal with that and how we give people space to express views and opinions which may be contrary to ours but are equally valid to ours is very important. And then when you think about the technological advancements, we've just had that view about what does technology and hybrid mean. But the world of AI changes these things phenomenally. Yeah, people say AI can be empathetic. It can to a degree, but at the moment, it's not as empathetic as a human. And then lastly, why is it important? I think all of us as humans know that really what we want is to be heard, to be understood, to be listened to, and to be treated with kindness. And for me, that's what empathy is really all about. And just to sort of bring it to life, for me, I was thinking about examples of where I've been treated with empathy and where I hope I've treated others with empathy. This time last year, I sadly lost my mother, and the small acts of kindness that my work colleagues gave to me, whether it was just giving me a bit of space or asking me if I was okay mean a huge amount to me. And then when I look back on where I've tried to help others, I had a young woman in my team who was on secondment from the US, didn't have her friends and family around, and her not very nice boyfriend, a day after signing a 2-year lease with her, decided to dump her. And she texted me to say, I'm going to be in late because I didn't sleep very well last night. And so I sent her a text message saying, don't come in, you're fine. It's not, we can manage, it's one day, don't worry about it. Tell me when you feel okay. Now for me, that, and for my team, that wasn't a big deal. For her, that meant the world. It meant that she could stay at home and phone her mum in America. It meant she could get herself back together. And I know how much it meant to her because she told me, but I also know because her mum sent me a Christmas card saying, thank you for doing that. So those kind of things they're not hard for us to do if we just stop, think, listen. Which then brings me on to the next bit, which is, can you learn how to do it? There's a big argument. Some psychologists say yes, some say no. I think some people are naturally more empathetic than others. I spoke to a psychiatrist who says it's all about the shape of your face. Apparently that has something to do with empathy, whether people respond to you in a certain way. But there are certainly behaviours and skills that we can learn. So being open, being available, being, going into discussions with good intent. I had a conversation with one of my colleagues before they went off on their holiday with their wider family, their brothers, their sisters, their parents. And they said, we're all going to sit down at the beginning and I'm going to say, just assume it's all good intent, because it's always going to go wrong next week. So those kind of things I think are really important. And I think being curious is also incredibly important. The more we're curious about each other, the more we ask questions in a respectful way of people's experience and where they're coming from, the more empathetic as an organisation and as individuals we can be. I've also seen some really good examples of how organisations can support through learning. I was at the ABI when Nick Turner from National Farmers Union Mutual spoke about some of the training that they do for all of their new joiners around what does it, that they basically mock up a room that has been flooded, and they get everyone to go in and see what it would be like to experience a catastrophic flood in your home. That gives people a real insight into what, if you're on a claims line and you're dealing with somebody who's very upset, this is why, this is what has upset them. So I think there are some really clever things that people can do around that. But not everything has to be a big thing. Sometimes it can just be a little thing. A cup of tea with someone who looks like they're having a bad day, or, to your point, someone pulling you aside and saying, are you okay? I'm not sure that that really went the way that I would have wanted it to go. It can make a big difference to everybody in their individual day. And then just as leaders, I think it's important to be kind to yourselves as well. Empathy is a hard thing to do sometimes, and particularly as a leader when you sometimes have to make decisions that you know will impact people. They've told you that they're worried about things. They've told you that something might happen that will make them unhappy. You've got to carry that with you, so be kind to yourself as well. Empathy is about listening to people, but it's also about making the right decisions for a business, and you've got to tread that fine balance. Don't want to end this in on a downer, so I'll go back to the superpower at the beginning. So there's lots of reasons I think it's a superpower. I think the impact it can have on people is phenomenal. I also think it's disproportionate. The small amount of effort that we as leaders make in being empathetic to others has a disproportionate effect on the morale, on the goodwill, of the engagement of our people, of the way that work is done within an organisation and the way that people feel. So for me, that's incredibly important. And then lastly, it's contagious. We've all seen it. If somebody's empathetic towards you and is kind towards you, you're far more likely to be to them and to others. So I'm going to put my little plea out for everybody to try and be as empathetic as possible, and I'm going to get my team who are here to hold me to that and tell me off when I'm not doing it.
Thanks, Katie. Lots of practical tips there, and I just think it links immediately back to authentic. I'm just listening to you speak, Carl, and I'm listening to Katie speak, and so empathy isn't about saying, "Are you all right?" whilst looking across the room at somebody completely different, because you don't actually really care, but you feel like you should. Whereas the authentic leader is, actually, I've got a massive day ahead of me. I'm so stressed, it's not true. I'm going to mask that across my face. I'm going to take this person to one side. I genuinely want to find out what's going on in their world. And I think the other key point that you mentioned there, Katie, is we don't know about other people's lives. I have this phrase, behind every closed door. To Kill a Mockingbird happens to be my favourite book ever, by the way, because they're messages you learn at 15 when you're studying it at school, and they take you through life. So I think there's a lot that we can go through there. And you're probably thinking, well, I was expecting a practical, a long leadership course or, this big intervention. But actually, no, when we're talking empathy, this is what this market is looking for from its leaders, people that genuinely care and want to hear from them. And I was at an intergenerational event I was moderating on Tuesday, and this came up time and again as to how can we understand across 5 generations. Well, this is about empathy. We need to listen because we've not experienced it for ourselves. So we have to listen, take it in, and then, move it forward and learn. I mean, I'm the oldest by a good 20 years in my business, and I just love every day learning from the people coming up through the organisation who've just got so much to offer. It's just fantastic. So you get more than you give, as in all things, don't you? Yeah. Any questions come through? Anybody in the room? In the room? We will, as I say, we will come back to questions. Anything burning, Katie?
I might ask this to everyone else as well. Leaders are often in a bubble surrounded by similar people in the same industry. How do you build empathy for people who are from very different backgrounds? Yeah,
that's a great question, and I think you're right. What I might do, actually, if it's okay, can we store that and come back to it at the end so that I don't blow everybody's, because I'm just going to rewrite everything I was thinking about before I came in. Sorry about that, everybody. But it's a great question, so please don't lose that, because I think we can all contribute to that. Brilliant. So we also asked in our poll, what were the most effective leadership behaviours? So this is where we're thinking, what do we want to see leaders doing? And look what's right down here at the bottom. And this is interesting for those of you, we've all worked in excos, we've all talked about, but honestly, what more can I do? I'm sponsoring an event, I've turned up for the event, what more can I do to get people to talk to me? And it's right at the bottom here, sponsor inclusion and belonging initiatives. That doesn't mean to say, by the way, that this market doesn't want to see its leaders doing that. Genuinely, it does. But in terms of the level of importance, what it really wants you to do is lead by example. So that doesn't mean sponsoring inclusion event, talking amazingly, being supportive, sponsoring, doing what you do as a leader, and then going in and losing it in a meeting because you're a bit irritated by the people in the room. Because that's the dichotomy, and that's what people see. So it's that constant lead by example linked to everything else, and also around encouraging open communication, and the link to that about seeking and acting on feedback. And I loved Carl. I hope you haven't stolen too much of Nathan's thunder. Listen more than you speak, which I should learn from as the chair of this panel, but I am who I am, and we have to go with it. So those things, that's what this market is looking for in our authentic leaders. Listen more than speak, and lead by example. And I'm delighted to say that Lorraine, as the Chief Executive of Asta, is now going to talk to us, voted by your people, which you probably didn't know, as somebody who could tell us, about what it actually means to role model and lead by example at work.
Okay, yep, so CEO at Asta, so again, we're delighted we're a sponsor of Dive In this year. This is our first year as a sponsor, and been included in the initiatives, and obviously attended the events in previous years, but I think really culture is absolutely one of the most important things to us at Asta. I've been there about 12 years. When I joined, we were a relatively small company with probably about 70 or 80 people, all in one open plan, very easy to know who everybody was, know their name, know something about them. We're now closer to sort of 250, 260 people. That's still not huge, but it's enough that it's not quite as easy to have that kind of really personal touch with everybody. And it's something I've been really conscious of over the last, certainly 3 years that I've been CEO, is how do you keep that small, kind of family feel culture? Because I think whenever we talk to people at work, that's one of the things they value most about Asta is the culture and the kind of, how people interact with each other, how that's done. And this is quite a hard question to ask about how you role model inclusion at work. So I decided to ask people. So with the help of some colleagues, I asked actually, what's the feedback? How do people see that I kind of role model inclusion at work? And we really boiled it down to kind of 3 main things. I think the first thing is absolutely, which others have touched on, is that trust. creating a trusting environment, a safe space for people to be. I think that's incredibly important. And like, others who've already spoken, I had an experience in a company where kind of politics and egos and things just created this toxic environment, and you were constantly being undermined, and it really kind of knocks your confidence. And actually it was nothing to do with my capabilities or whatever. It's just because, for whatever reason, people have their own agendas, your personality, your style or whatever doesn't quite fit. And it takes quite a long time to recover from that, back to what Carl said. And absolutely, I kind of stayed too long in that situation, doesn't everybody? And then once you're out of it, you kind of look back. And so again, for me, being really, really determined that is just something we don't have at Asta. So we don't have egos, we don't have politics. We leave those at the door, and sort of myself and my exec team are truly a team, all striving for the same thing. And that flows down, so you don't then get kind of silos and divisions between people. If everybody can see that actually that's how the leadership team are behaving and acting together, then I think that flows down. And having that safe place where there is a no blame culture. None of us are perfect. We might like to think we are sometimes, but we're not, and everybody makes mistakes and gets things wrong. But again, knowing that it's a safe place to do that, because if it's not, nobody ever tries something different. And actually just being really almost curious to learn why something didn't work, rather than saying, that's it, we're never doing that again, we're never letting anybody, kind of try something new again. So I think that's something that we're really kind of focused on doing. Some of the feedback I got as well was about that, as a leadership team, we treat people with the same. We treat people the same. It's irrelevant of age, role, level in the company, gender, ethnicity, or whatever. My engagement with them on a one-to-one basis is the same. It's not, I've got more time for you because you're important in the role you do. Everybody's important, and everybody's a part of that. So really, really conscious of kind of treating everybody the same. And taking time, you touched on it, Kate, listening more than talking sometimes, really hearing the feedback and wanting to understand it, and then wanting to have a feedback loop, and actually being able to say, we heard, we listened, this is what we've done about it. So we have regular checkpoints, or I have regular check-ins. I do kind of regular CEO lunches, we do monthly staff briefings, we do regular pulse surveys, regular one-to-ones through the company. So we do a lot of actually taking feedback and kind of really listening to it, and then playing back. So if we get a bad result on something, we're not going to kind of bury it and hide it. We're going to explain why, try and pick at that and understand why, and then try and work out what it is that we can do differently to move that on. And so really checking that people's lived experience is what you think it is, because it's very easy to sit there and say, oh, this is a fabulous place to work, everybody must love it here. But actually, unless you actually listen to what that lived experience is, you don't really know that. And you also can't assume that everybody's lived experience is the same, for whatever reason. And really being, again, it's back to the authentic piece, the empathy piece, kind of tone from the top, for me, really, really matters. And if you don't, you've got to not do as I say. It's just that thing of how are other people going to kind of listen and behave like that if they don't see those behaviours coming from the top. And so again, part of what Carl said, we've come up with specific leadership values. So we've got values across the company, but we've produced a set of leadership values that tie into that say what is the behaviour we expect, and not just of the exec team, but kind of all the senior leaders across the business. And again, they're measured on that. That flows into performance reviews and remuneration. But I think it's also incredibly, again, the sort of feedback I got was that I was very accessible and approachable, and that matters to people. And sometimes I find it quite hard to kind of internalise or whatever that your time is so valuable or means so much to somebody, because you think, I'm just a person like everybody else. But actually the impact that a 5-minute conversation in the corridor has when you ask somebody about their holiday or their new dog or their, recently born child or how their wedding went or whatever, just kind of storing some of those nuggets about people and just being there and actually stopping to talk to people and not being too busy. I mean, we work in a relatively open plan office, and just making sure that you are kind of visible and approachable. There's no physical barriers or kind of mental barriers. It's not a case of, I'm too busy, go away. Which, say, doesn't help the diary and getting through things. But again, I just think it's really important to do that, just that making time, because people really appreciate it. And the kind of last set of things I had on my list was, again, really about kind of elevating others as well. So not just kind of promoting yourself or promoting Asta or whatever, really taking the opportunity to promote and encourage other people. And I don't mean just a promotion in terms of technical grades up, but really enabling people to step up and asking their opinion in a meeting and showing that you value them and you value their input and their feedback and things. I think that's really important as well. Obviously things like, you know, employee resource groups and things, they are important, but sometimes it's the behaviours in normal day-to-day meetings and situations, I think, that have more impact than a specific forum.
So not much then.
Sorry. No, I probably talk too much.
Not at all, Lorraine. That's absolutely, you know, it's fantastic. I can see why your team wanted you to come and represent them today, and I can see why they all love working for you at Asta. Just to pick up on one point, if I may, because you talk about treating everyone the same, but actually what I'm hearing is what you're doing is giving everybody the same access to you and to their ability to perform well at work, which might mean actually treating them all slightly differently, and I'm hearing that coming through. But I just wanted that to land with the audience, because unless I'm
you're absolutely right, and I think it's about, there's no reason why that person shouldn't have time in my diary and that person should. So
exactly.
It's very much as you say about giving them the same access, but absolutely, and again, that's part of the empathy piece, isn't it, that you adapt how you interact with somebody depending on their circumstances and what you think they need out of the situation.
Definitely, and I think it's working like a dream. I can't take any credit at all, because I had nothing to do with the design. You guys all did that with the team, but it just keeps linking back line by line, doesn't it, to actually, if we are authentic and we empathise and we role model it, then we're going a long way. So it's not rocket science, it is things within our gift. I'm just conscious I want Nathan to have the floor, so I'm going to pend questions, if I may, and we'll come back round to them, if that's all right. So I'm going to move us along, because this is a toughie, and this is a toughie in this market, so no pressure at all, so apologies for giving you, because we've worked a lot on this. I thought it was a person. And I've mentioned it a few times to try and tee it up for you, is that, you know, encouraging open communication is so absolutely key. And what we really want you to do, Nathan, if you would, is share with us what Lloyd's have done, because I know you've done a phenomenal amount over the past couple of years, if not longer, to try and get people talking to you. There are still some frustrations, or how do we do more, how can people do it? But, you know, I know that people are really keen to share, to learn from you. What are the things that you've actually done that have changed that landscape, which you're seeing now in your culture service, etc.?
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Nathan, you probably guessed, as last to go on the panel. Well, I was going to start here to think about the conditions. If you think about the best team you've ever worked in, might be a small team, might be a large team, and think about the conditions that surrounded that team. You probably were able to make mistakes. You were probably collaborating a lot. You were probably being able to share ideas. You probably weren't too afraid if your idea got knocked down or somebody said, no, that's a bad idea for these reasons. And a lot of this from a practical perspective, I sort of take back to that, and I think about early in my career, I was working for a retail business. It wasn't M&S, luckily. And I made a catastrophic mistake. It was in the days when you printed off handbooks for employees, and I printed through a printer, but thousands of these things, and I did the wrong front cover. It was a bit of a spelling mistake, stroke wrong, and honestly, they were stuffed in wardrobe. Every time I opened a wardrobe, about 20 of them fell out. It was just like a constant sort of reminder. And it was my first job in an office, and it was an office full of women and me as a male. I'm from Yorkshire, I have a fairly distinct accent, and I was a farmer before I moved into this. So I had sort of all this sort of stuff going on through my head. And the manager at the time and the PA in the team well, just dealt with it brilliantly, and they just made me feel that it was okay. I mean, I felt bad, don't get me wrong, for a long time, but actually the way that they treated me just made me feel sort of a lot more comfortable. Just again, as to your point, it was real small little things that they did. It wasn't anything dramatic, and so they created this psychological safety for me to be able to feel I could then start to actually perform and not mess up the next handbook that I did. And if I bring it a little bit closer to the question on what Lloyd's been done, and I've only been here 8 months, so I can't take huge credit for this because it's been going on for a number of years. But one of the things certainly in the last sort of 12 months that the team has been focused on is inclusive communications workshops. And when I first joined, I got to attend one of these, and we actually use actors to really bring it to life. And it was really, really powerful because it was those little things that we all do from a behavioural perspective that mean you can have a really successful conversation with somebody, or you can maybe have a fairly unproductive. And it doesn't matter whether you're managing 300 people or 4 people. The same principles apply to everyone. And what they sort of really dug into is, how do you create psychological safety? How do you have open body language, as an example? How do you greet people when they walk into your office or walk into your meeting room or walk into your team environment? And so really some of the basic levels. And one thing that always sort of stuck was they said, look, you've really, when you're talking to somebody, you need to engage and actually look at them and concentrate and be present. And that evening I remember going home and I was half watching the football and my wife was talking to me and I was thinking, I'm not really doing that right now. I need to think about it. So it is easy to slip into those moments. So we've actually invested. We've put the whole organisation through that. But because we operate in 200 countries, we've got lots of natural diversity built into the markets that we operate into the business that we do. And when we thought about what drives business performance, well, it's creativity, it's ideas, it's speaking up, it's saying that's not going to work for this reason, it's saying there's a challenge to that, and the more you can do that in the teams, then the better business performance that you can have. We also looked, Patrick on his first day said, look, one of my guiding principles is openness, and he's been true to that word ever since, internally and externally with the communications. So to your point on role modelling, it can come from the top as well. We built it into our dashboards, engagement surveys, so team leaders, individuals can see how we're performing on engagement. Are we creating teams who feel that they're psychologically safe? So really embedding it in the sort of mechanics of the organisation, so it's there and it's present and we're holding the mirror up to ourselves and to others. We've embedded inclusive hiring because we know the hiring process is really key to have that built in. And I think that as we take this forward and we develop it into our leadership development programs going forward, it will absolutely be in there. But I was a little bit struck by, just to finish, what René Carroll said on the first session at the start of this week, if people saw it. And he said, look, everybody can be a leader. This is not the highest person from a hierarchical perspective in the room. It's not the one that's got 20 years, experience versus 2. We can all be a leader. We can all be authentic. We can all be empathetic. We can all, create that team environment that I described. And often it is the colleagues as much as the leader who create it. So I think I just wanted to leave on that and to say, look, this is not just the responsibilities if you're a leader. It's everybody's responsibility across the organisation.
Thanks, Nathan. That's really insightful. And I absolutely agree. There was a graduate called Oliver at that opening event,
brilliant, right? Yeah.
Who was just absolutely superb. I mean, he just grabbed the nettle and led as a graduate across the market and had 500 people having coffee. Was it 5,000?
He's now got 5,000 in his network.
Yeah.
I've not been asked for a coffee yet, so I need to find
out. You need to be asked for a coffee.
I did whisper. I was sat next to Caroline Sandeman. I said, I think he might be the next CEO somewhere at this rate. So
absolutely, it's not going to be long, is it? No. But I mean, just linking back that, Nathan, to when we're talking about, listening more than you're speaking, hearing the voice in the room, and the fact that we have got, as René said, leaders all around us, and whether they're 4, 5, 6, 17 or 62, they've all got those, those leadership qualities are everywhere. So if we listen more in the room, we're going to hear that and we're going to let somebody take leadership. And I was at an event yesterday, and I think it was Canopius, forgive me if I've misrepresented them, where one of the things they've done is set up this bottom-up So they've just opened up a whole sort of communication channel where people can have ideas, and if the idea wins at leadership level, they'll invest in it. And they've had over 250 projects, which they'd never thought of, that have come from the floor. So it's about, you know, creating that culture of belonging. Just there's so much evidence from this panel and beyond that in doing that, you're unleashing this huge amount of potential within your organisation that can take you so much further. So thank you very much for that. I can open up the floor now for questions. If any, have we got some? Let's hear from our virtual people first, if we may, Katie. Any burning themes?
There's some very diverse questions in here. Let me go to Lorraine, one for you. You spoke about feedback loops. How do you ensure that employees see value in doing this rather than just seeing it as a tick box exercise?
So I think for people to see value in it, things have to change. So it can't just be feedback for feedback's sake and asking people for feedback and then there's no action coming from it. So I think that's one thing we're really conscious to do is when we send out results of a quarterly pulse survey or whatever, we kind of recap on then what we've done in response to the actions from the one before. So hopefully they then see value in giving that.
There's a really interesting one that came in quite early around what role does bravery and courage play for modern leaders, particularly facing political, societal adversity?
Well, this is one of the Lloyd's values, Nathan. Maybe we throw that over to that one.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. Well, it's interesting because I think when I sort of reflect on this, I think often when you say the word, we sort of in our heads have this really sort of heroic thing that you have to sort of do, and actually it doesn't have to be that. It could just be listening to somebody. It could be having a conversation with somebody. I think Patrick has a saying around, do today what others, won't do tomorrow. And so I think often it's just about thinking, look, where do I need to take a stance because it feels right to me for these reasons, and I'm being true to myself. Because if you do that, tomorrow or the day after, you're not then going to change that view. So I think it goes a little bit back to the authenticity, and then feeling like this is the right thing to do for whatever reasons, and then taking that forward. But if you do it from an authentic place rather than I feel like I've got to do this, then it's going to be true to you and what you want to do.
I think that's very well said. Absolutely great answer to the question. And that, and that one of our values is courage as well. And so that would be when you desperately want to win the contract, but you actually don't agree with what the client's saying, so you call it and you think, but 9 times out of 10, that's what you're valued for, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Any other comments on being courageous and brave?
There's some comments coming through with a bit of a theme from our colleagues in America saying, how do we counter some of the accusations that some of the things we're talking about are woke, or perhaps that policies in certain territories are difficult to deploy given some of the circumstances. So I don't know if anyone's got any. There's also some very pointed ones in there, but I won't put anyone on the spot with that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts.
I mean, we operate in a global context, don't we?
Yeah.
But we don't have to dilute our values in order to make sure that we please around the world. And I've got some comments on that, but I'll keep them to myself for now. Anybody on the panel?
I don't think anything anybody has been talking about here today is woke. Agreed. Or is just focused on, kind of a particular part of inclusion or whatever. To me, this is all behaviours that people should be exhibiting. And it doesn't matter who you're interacting with. It could be a group of any type of person or any gender or whatever. It's just, to me, it feels like decent, normal human behaviour. I don't think it's been woke.
No, I agree.
In any way.
I agree, Lorraine. When I was thinking about the authenticity piece, it's not only a leadership trait; it's a human trait, right? I think being yourself and feeling like you can be yourself in a work environment, in a social environment, and then leading by example. To me, I would agree that there's nothing woke about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree. If I took away one thing from each person, who wouldn't agree with? You want to be able to be yourself at work. You want people to be kind and treat you well.
Yeah.
You want people who you can look up to and see as big, good people, and you want to feel safe at work. That doesn't sound particularly revolutionary.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I know I'm joined by colleagues. You all work in global organisations. We haven't dropped any of our global programs. We might have nuanced the language slightly to make sure that people feel more comfortable with it, but we haven't dropped not a single global program since changes were made in terms of what people's ways of thinking, because it is about authenticity, it is about empathy, and it's about role modelling, and it's about open communication. And that leads to, as we can show with our 4 leaders on the panel today, leads to high-performing organisations where everybody can contribute as much as they want to contribute. And that's what belonging is definitely all about. So that, because we've all in our lives been somewhere where we didn't feel we belonged, and we might not have known that's what was happening, and our panel have shared so transparently and openly, and I do respect you for that, for your own experiences over life. But we've all been in those situations where you think, honestly, if only they'd known me better. I remember presenting to the Scottish MPs, and there were 12 of them, and they were all male, and they were just in a row staring at me, and I couldn't say a word, and I thought, they're just going to think I'm a numpty. And half an hour earlier, you'd been presenting somewhere where you felt included, and you warmed up and you went for it, It's just, we've all been in that situation, so I think just let's think about that we'll have people in our organisations who are feeling that right now. So let's listen to what they've got to say, let's respond to what they're saying, and take action. I think we've probably got time for one more question.
The lady over here.
Thank you so much. My question is for Lorraine. I think you spoke earlier about lived experiences, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts in terms of, because it can be quite a big, clunky topic, bringing people's lived experiences into the workplace. But as a senior leader, it's important. And how do you bring that to fore in terms of your leadership? How do you bring people's lived experiences into how you show up and how you lead, whether that's your senior leadership team or sort of the wider organisation? Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess when I was talking about lived experience, and I'm thinking about people's kind of lived experience at work, so whatever culture and things you think you're putting in place. But again, I think that goes back to a lot of the stuff we've spoken about the kind of empathy piece, being accessible, having conversations with people that aren't always about work, having those kind of social interactions. I think, Carl, you mentioned it, turning up at, team off-sites, so we don't just do kind of board ones, we go to team ones, we have company-wide socials which you turn up at and take part in and things like that. So I think unless you interact with people on a more social level rather than a purely kind of business level, I think to me that's how you then get the indication. And it's quite funny, you either take somebody out, so it could be the same group of people, and the conversation you will have outside the office is incredibly different to you have in the office. And even kind of noticed on a Friday, people come in and dress down much more on a Friday, and even that puts a kind of subtle shift on how they engage and how they interact. So I think it's just being willing to tap into all those different kind of situations and topics, not just work ones.
Can I just add something? I think maybe a practical answer to your question that we have, and this really deeply rooted in our culture at the Hartford, is we have what's called courageous conversation circles, so C3s. So they're facilitated, obviously, because they can go to some pretty difficult places. But they've ranged from things like being a female leader in the workplace to mental health to suicide awareness. And we've had our colleagues that have really brought some of their experiences to life, and they've felt and showed some real vulnerability. We've also recently launched on the back of that a series of podcasts where we have a couple of my colleagues in the room have actually done them, where they've taken themes that are important to them and shown a light on them, who they are as people, what matters to them, but also bringing in and tying something that's meaningful, whether it be about mental health, whether it be about other topical things. And so I think all of that creates and sets a tone for people to feel like they can do that in safe places.
I think that's a great note to end on. That's something that everybody can do in their own organisation. So I was going to ask you all for top takeaways, but I think you've given us so many and we're out of time. So I hope you found it really valuable. Please feel free to continue the conversation. I do hope that you do. It's a starter, not an ender. And it's been my absolute pleasure to host with Carl and Katie, Lorraine and Nathan today. And thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.